Happy Sunday, my people. It's good to be back. It's good to be here. My 27th birthday just passed, and I'm really just happy to be alive, and I'm grateful to have my family and to be loved and to be safe in this crazy world. And today, I just want to talk a little bit more about the things that are happening inside of this crazy world of ours, and also answer a few questions about how we can become better engineers, devs, and thought leaders inside of the technology space. So, with that being said, let's get started. So, this week, AWS had an outage. It was caused by a automation that was, something went wrong with the automation where one of the DNS servers, DNS being domain name server, was mistakenly configured, and that caused the applications that we rely on to pretty much, if they thought they were going to 123 Main Street, they didn't have the actual directions to get to their chosen path or their chosen destination. And so this caused companies like Coinbase, Eat Sleep, and a few others to basically be offline for a few hours. And this is super crazy because if you think about the fact that it just shows how reliant we are on one company. AWS controls 30% of the, I won't say controls, they have 30% of the market share inside of, companies using the cloud or using the these cloud service providers infrastructure. So when you're thinking about that, it's like we have a system and multiple systems, payment systems, healthcare systems, financial systems, and even some mission critical like security systems that are all flowing through one provider that can make mistakes. And so when we're thinking about the internet and what it was really meant to be, it's supposed to be a lot of decentralized networks that are able to communicate and talk to each other over the public infrastructure. And we've kind of moved a little bit away from that to this point where, like I said, one company owning 30% of the internet's backbone. That, and let's say for the US, that means 100 million people are relying on one company with maybe 500,000 employees to stay online, to make sure that we can have the services that we really rely on in this current era. And, you know, that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about one, going to work at a company like this and understanding the stakes that are involved, right? If you are imagine being the person at Thanksgiving to knock down the turkey or knock down the rice or knock down the whole table. You bump the table and it crash. Imagine being that. So that's not a job to play around with. One. Two, it's a lot of responsibility for a single company to have because from a cybersecurity standpoint, I know if 30% of the world's internet resources or network requests are going through you, that just makes you a more it makes you a more important target for someone who may have nefarious means or nefarious objectives. So that kind of just exposes where we are to other people and hackers that may, want to take advantage of that. And so, for all of the engineers either working at AWS, which I know that was probably hard for y'all that day, so, thanks for your service. But anyone else that are thinking about, working in companies like that, it's, something to keep in mind on how we move forward to make sure we're not so reliant on a single provider to make sure that our resources are online. Like with Sleep, the users of their beds could not even use the bed, right? Imagine you are an elderly man or woman that needed your bed to lift up for you to be able to get out of the bed and start your day because of some health issues or because of just age. Having your entire system be reliant on one provider working in the cloud is super disruptive to your potential users. And so we have to think about how do we architect our systems to be more reliable and effective because we're building for more and more people. So it's going to be more and more important to have all of your resources, set up in the best way. And we need to have better systems in place for governance and even testing, quality assurance. It's really difficult to understand how a change like this got all the way through development to production. And so that's something I would love to work on a project like that just to think about, did they go in depth as much as they needed to go in disaster readiness? Like this, they got it solved within a few hours, but how do we make sure it never happens again? Is it just updating the configurations so that it doesn't ever put that type of null value or error value into it? Or is it making sure that we don't roll out changes across all of our infrastructure without at first verifying that the places that it's been rolled out to are still up and running? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do like canary testing, where this is more like a rollout, or you can have like red blue environments where you make the change in one environment and then you switch your traffic there, but you still have your other environment still working and up online just in case something breaks and you have to just move everything back to the working environment. So there's a few ways to go about that, but it's incredibly important for all of us to think about how we're building our software in order to take advantage of these types of opportunities. Another news story that I saw that was pretty interesting was the fact that AI values certain lives more than others. There was a research paper done, and I'm going to link all of these inside of the description so you can go do some research on your own. But it valued, I think, GPT-5 or some other model was shown to value Nigerian lives 20 times more than an American's life. And there were other models that had different types of biases that they exhibited against or for certain groups. And so when we're thinking about the AI that we're implementing and deploying into the environments and the industries that we rely on, healthcare, financials, real estate, things like that, if they're going to be the most effective, we have to really get a solid grasp and understanding on how that type of bias is going to affect the users of these systems, the citizens of these countries, right? How are we making sure that there are guardrails in place so that an AI system that biases in favor toward one group is not responsible for protecting the safety of that group, right? And so maybe it's sometimes having an adversarial system set up where multiple models are working against each other to create the best experience for everyone. But it's important to think about how do we build those types of protections into the system. Because right now, according to this GPT model, if I were a driver in America and I'm driving my autonomous car is driving me to my destination, and I am a American person, and someone that it thinks and assumes and registers to be a Nigerian is walks out into the street. And maybe instead of it favoring my safety in its decision to avoid that pedestrian, it decides that my safety doesn't matter and better maybe prefers to send me into a wall. And so, and there's other 1,000 other scenarios we could think about where bias could be either used in your favor or not in your favor. But for the people who are not the ones that are in favor by these bias, it's scary. And for the people who are in favor for these biases, think about that also and I don't want to call it a responsibility to ensure equity, but it is something to keep in mind if you realize that the systems that are in place are literally built to protect you more than others. And if that's the case, as a human being, I would say it's your responsibility and it's your privilege to use that situation and use that luck, that blessing, to improve the lives of the people who are underserved and less fortunate. So think about that as you're building and as you're using these different products with AI. And keeping it along in the AI theme, I saw a story about um, Huawei. Oh, wait, I can't remember the name of the company right now, but there are some Chinese companies. One of them being a large phone manufacturer in Asia and in China, and another being the developers of DeepSeek, the open source small tiny LLM, and they're doing some work inside of, I think they had a conference in South Africa, but they're present on the continent of Africa in order to evangelize the benefits of the DeepSeek models and the things that they're building. Some of the benefits that are being highlighted over there are the fact that they're smaller and cheaper to run, so they're also less energy intensive, and they are much more easily deployed in infrastructures and regions that are resource constrained. If we're thinking about most of the continent of Africa does not have the same type of access to the internet or electricity as we do in a country like America, the United States of America. And so they're looking for solutions like DeepSeek in order to make the most of the resources that they have available. So they're trying to be the most resource efficient that they can be. And some of the models that we have over here, they're not built with those types of constraints in mind. And so there's an entire continent potentially of users who are being underserved and who are looking to find that solution in a country like China. And so that's something to keep in mind for even engineers not even building with AI. It's thinking about the apps that we build and the resources that they use. I recently wrote an app, and in the onboarding step, I went through the fact that there were maybe, let's say, 5 network calls required in order to fully onboard a user. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're thinking, for 1,000 or maybe even 1,000,000 users, then we start seeing that 5 times all that, those users. And that can add up over time and be even more expensive than it is over here if we're competing for less resources in that area. So you have to architect your solutions and your systems to keep in mind the resources and the users who will be using those wherever it's going to be. And so let's get into the questions for this week, and let's see who we can help serve.
How should I budget as a software engineer?
So engineers make a lot of money, and that's, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's shown that the median salary for a software developer is $131,000 per year. And so if you're thinking about that, that puts you automatically in a 30% tax bracket, assuming you live in a high tax state like New York or maybe California. So I expect a third of your income to be given to Uncle Sam and his little brother, Roderick, every year, just off of that alone. So budget that. Keep that in mind when you're thinking about what your spending is going to look like. Your salary is not, like, your take-home pay is not your salary divided by 12 or divided by the number of pay periods in a month or in a year. It is whatever you see after everyone else has taken their cut. And there are ways to reduce that tax burden legally, but assuming, like, whatever your take home is at the end of the day, that's what you have to work with, then you have to think about your savings in especially in a market like this where over a quarter million, I won't say a quarter million, but at least 100,000 software developers have been laid off from their roles this year, and probably even more over the last 1 to 2 years, or 18 to 24 months. It's incredibly important to have some type of reserve set up for you to make sure that when these changes do happen in the market, you are not caught off guard and unable to service your life. So I recommend 10% always to your savings. If you are a faith or community focused person, then I also do a 10% off the top of my take home pay to either, whatever the community or the organization is that you choose to support, giving that money to them so that they could grow and improve the value in your community. That's something to keep in mind when you're doing your budget. Uh, you gotta have, what I guess the when I was budgeting for myself, I wanted to keep my expenses, like my living expenses, housing, food, transportation, those things. I kept that cost within 30% of my income. You could go as high as 50%, but you know, that's higher. So keeping that in mind, if your salary ever did change to go lower, you might be really used to that higher salary and may not have the means or the ability to decrease if need be. So, like I said, between 30 and 50% is safe, and maybe another 30% in your uh, inside of your. For me, that was my wants. Uh, I would sometimes between 20 and 30%. Always, that's entertainment. That's going out on dates. That is, anything that's just the fun, arts, and leisure of your life. It can be hobbies that you just, it makes life just feel brighter. That's always a great thing and something you have to reserve energy and money for, because if you don't do it, you won't have the energy to go out and do the hard work necessary to save and give to charity and live your normal life with your expenses. And then you also need to uh, put at least 10% into an investment. And there are different vehicles that you can use for your investing. It could be your 401k through your job or your employer. It could be a self-directed IRA or self-directed Roth IRA, which is it's not tax deductible inside of the or yeah, you pay taxes on the money this year, so that when you deduct and you start using that funding, you don't have to pay taxes then on that money. And so those are different vehicles you can use to invest, and there's different asset classes. You can invest in real estate. Uh, you can invest in stocks or bonds. You can invest in uh, commodities like gold or silver. You can invest in anything, but make sure you are always investing. Always be buying. Uh, Whether the market is up or down, make sure you have some type of exposure to a diverse set of uh, investments. Again, going back to, you don't ever know when you'll need that money to supplement your current income due to any type of market changes. So having that always situated, uh, and make sure, like, if you think 100%, you gotta break that down in the best way you can. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind always.
How can I pivot from another industry into technology?
So I hear variations of this question really often, and I recently heard a metaphor, or no, it wasn't a metaphor, but it was a story that would make a great metaphor for this. So if you're great at basketball and you know how to make a three from the from the line, or you know how to dribble really well, and you know how to keep up when you're running back and forth across the court, that doesn't guarantee that you'll be great as a football player. But there are some transferable skills within that athleticism that will be very useful, whether you're playing football, baseball, soccer, or any other sport, because you've trained similar muscles, or you've trained a class of muscles that can be used. And so I think that's a great point to think about and focus on when you're thinking about how do I pivot from something like healthcare potentially into tech, or maybe even if you're a law student going into tech. If you have the experience of learning about the law and reading case studies and staying up to date on the types of changes inside of legal codes, you might be a great person to join a GRC team, a governance, regulations, and compliance team inside of a large tech company or a financial services company that needs to make sure that their policies and practices are aligned to these legal frameworks. And you might be the best person to have those types of conversations to make sure that the not only engineers but the executives and everyone in between the organization are up to date, but also aware on what they need to do to play their part in that mission. If you're a uh, previous insurance broker and you have experience building relationships with new clients and managing a lot of different projects at once and different clients at once and different uh, taking different requests from multiple people, you might be a great person to work in a sales department for a technology company. And I'm including these uh, context roles to what I believe is a full software engineering role. Maybe you're not an engineer yet, but you want to be an engineer. And you have to just get in the company first. But once you get in the company, you start being around people with these types of ideas, and they're building with the technology that you'll need to learn to build with. They're great resources to learn from and grow with. And at some point, when you do have enough skills, or when you're around the code long enough, where you can say, hey, I might know how to do this, is there an opportunity for me to partner with another developer to walk through a day in the life with them to help them do their job? And at some point, you could even become the person in their role because you learned your part and you started taking the time to learn their part, and now you're operating better than you or them could have done without having that dynamic knowledge. And so think about other ways that you can join a technology company to help build and contribute to the technology and the systems being built around you, and using and leveraging your domain expertise to further their goals and make their vision actually become possible. Because an engineer is not enough to make equitable decisions inside of the healthcare sector. An engineer is not enough to know how to invest uh, safely into global markets, so that we are uh, not only positively impacting the world with our investments and our capital, but also making sure we are not being swindled and lied to, and having those other controls in place that an engineer just can't do it alone. So that's where someone with your skills may be best suited to support.
What does big tech look like if every software engineer created their own ecosystem of products, services, and communities?
So I love this question, and my answer would be, will be more likely to see much smaller companies and a lot more of them. Think about the fact that thousands of engineers have been laid off. What if every one of those thousands started their own product development firm? And so each of them created their own version of a finance tracking app or their own version of a vehicle management app. The companies that they build may not have the 30% market share that Amazon has for a particular domain or a particular product. But those niche products and those niche markets are being served more effectively by a passionate group that is and has the opportunity and ability to be a lot closer to them than what a large big tech provider can do. And so we could see maybe lower prices or easier access to some of the services and tools that we need to rely on in this current era. It might look closer to the vision that the creators of the internet actually thought about when they were thinking about decentralized nodes that were accessible and open, and just having more people sharing resources so that we could have better outcomes inside of society. So I could also imagine where focus, like more companies allow you to focus more on trust and transparency above all else. Right now, you focus on the big names that, can gather most of the attention. But what happens when the attention can go everywhere? When the attention is accessible for all of us to share and take part in. And so that's what I really think is going to be happen when we start having a more ownership mentality as engineers and people building things to support our communities and the people that we care about. But I do also think the role will change because there are some services that cannot be done on uh, a boutique scale. Some services are so large that you need high concentrations of energy and employees and support to make them work. And so the future of, say, labor and even just the systems that we're building could change dramatically. But I think at that point it would be focused way more on building something that people love to be a part of and use.
How do you know when you've done enough?
So I would say that this is a really difficult question to answer when you're thinking about how do I make sure that I've done enough? And that could be I've done enough in my life, I've done enough today, I've done enough in this project, and so on and so forth. There's so many things that you could be working on, and they all have a different limit on what is enough. And sometimes it's going to be really difficult to make that distinction for yourself. Sometimes you're going to be responsible for fixing something and it's going to take a lot out of you. And so it may not be enough to stop before you're done. But if you think about enough as you need to be able to do enough to get you to the next stopping point, the next healthy stopping point. Maybe you can't stop anywhere in the process where, if you're swimming from the New York pier to the Jersey City pier. If you get tired halfway through, you cannot give up, and that's not you. So therefore it is not enough. You have not done enough. You need to get all the way there, right? So the definition of enough could be dependent on what resources you have to support you. Are there other people who can take on some of that load? And it also is built a bit on the why you have. Like, why do you have to give more or why do you have to give less? Is it because you need to give more in another area of your life? So you've done enough today in your job? Have you done enough with your finances or your personal finances, your family's finances, that it's time to do a little bit more for your community? Those are the types of questions that you have to think about when you're thinking about what is enough. Doing enough means you have to listen to your mind, you have to listen to your body, you have to listen to your spirit to make sure that enough really aligns with all the things that matter to you, all the things that you value. And so when you're thinking about enough, think about avoiding burnout by managing your energy in such a way that you always have enough energy, enough again, right? Enough energy to funnel it into the things that are valuable to you. And so, yeah, it's gonna be really difficult to know when enough is enough. But you have the opportunity to focus as much of your energy as you can inside of the things that require you and only you to grow them. So this week, there's a lot going on in the government with the government shutdown currently happening. There's a lot going on in the world with a lot of different changes happening inside of leadership and politics and all that type of stuff. And we don't have any, opinion. I won't say opinion. We're not choosing sides on either anything. We're not choosing sides on anything. But I reread some of my notes on the U.S. Constitution and the type of spirit that was imbued into that document during the founding of this version of this country. And I know that the founding fathers did not want a big government. And that was clear from the original Articles of Confederation, where the big government was actually clearly avoided, but they noticed that there were some problems, so they said, let's make the government just a bit bigger to resolve some of the problems that we were seeing then. And that's exactly what happened. The problems were resolved with the slightly larger government. And I think I'm seeing a pattern since 1776 to today, where every time the people see and notice a problem, they turn to the government to solve that problem. And so the government just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if you measure a government by the amount of money that it expends, then we have some of the largest governments that we have ever had in the history of society. And maybe this is just normal, that power flows and centralizes, and that could be just the nature of things. But I'm advocating for a world where everyone takes a more meaningful part in contributing to the community around them, in terms of the people, the environment, and just the energy that exists in the world that they live in, and doing everything and whatever is possible to live on your own terms. because the government does not have the ability to take care of all of the people that it's taking care of. And that is not just programs that support people in danger. It's also the efforts that the government is going in to make stands throughout the world. And just I think it just requires more self growth of each of us to learn how we can take a little bit more of that effort so that these central authorities don't have to do it all on their own. How can we help to take some of that stress so that the government can focus on things that really truly require strong, more central authority? And so that's on my mind. And the fact that in 2025 we have way more powerful tools and resources than the most powerful king did 500 years. And so we have everything we need to do just to provide our responsibility. It's time for us to do that. So focus on your seeds, focus on